Hallo.
Hi, welcome. From my side, my name is Bijan Moini, and I work for the Society of Freedom Rights. And in the next half hour, I would like to explain some things to you that concern a possible ban on the AfD party. I hope that you'll leave this presentation a little more knowledgeable and with a little more understanding on why it's so difficult to answer this question. This is the program. I'll start with the current state and counter strategies. Then I'll talk about the prerequisites and the effects of a party ban, how the party ban is achieved, political counter-arguments, and the position of the Society for Freedom Rights. And in the end, we won't have time for a discussion, but later there'll be a meetup with Max and me, and we had an hour each for our presentations. And now, we put the discussion in the meetup. So Max already said something. We are dealing with a party that is confirmed to be right-wing extremists by different constitution protection offices, and also a court in Münster just confirmed that they threaten the constitution. And especially in the states we have elections this autumn, the AfD has good chances for success, and many people are worried about that, and I'm one of them. There are different strategies you could use. The best strategy would be to prevent those parties to get into power, so to prevent people from voting. That is Olaf Scholz's strategy. He just tells people don't vote for the AfD, and that hasn't worked as well in the past few years, and my trust that this will work is very limited. But still, the first line of defense must always be the political one. Second item, Max only briefly mentioned it. What can you do as preventative measures with all the opportunities a party has, even if they just have a third of the votes? What can you do to prevent them from using all of those obstruction possibilities? Politics is in demand now. For example, the Federal Constitutional Court has the opportunity to determine the threat to democracy, and the ban of the party would be the ultimate ratio. So the possibility of the ban is within the Constitution in Article 21, paragraph 2. The grey part is not relevant. Parties that, by reason of their aims or the behavior of their adherents, seek to undermine or abolish the free democratic basic order or to endanger the existence of the Federal Republic of Germany shall be unconstitutional. And later it says that only the Federal Constitutional Court shall rule on this question. So, just ban the AfD is a very moot point, because only the Federal Constitutional Court can do that. Now, what are the prerequisites for a ban, and what would be the effect of a ban? We can look at this article closer. What is the free democratic basic order? This is not all of the articles in the Constitution. Of course, a party can call for the abolishment of single articles of the Constitution. If that were the case, our Constitution couldn't improve. So the determination is very strict, and it has 3 pillars. The first pillar is to guarantee human dignity. The second is democracy in itself, and the third is the rule of law. For example, you would threaten human dignity if a party such as the NPD claims or wants to have a distinction between real Germans and not real Germans. So if you attach consequences to whether someone has a citizenship or not. So that was democracy would be violated if a party would make democratic competition impossible. For example, through gerrymandering, which means redefining electoral districts in a way that would threaten the election. The rule of law would be threatened, for example, by claiming or aiming to take away the court's rights to examine decisions on asylum, for example. So this free democratic basic order can be abbreviated as FTDO. This is a long abbreviation. So I just named a few examples where, for example, human dignity is limited and is affected. This would mean not that human dignity is abolished, but it would be limited. And the rule of law would only be limited with the example I just named. But what would be abolished would be democracy. Democracy would be abolished if a position becomes impossible. And so far, this hasn't become relevant in the Constitution. Now, the most difficult point, the behavior of their adherents must lead to this threatening of democratic values. So you have to really prove that the party has certain aims, such as, for example, was uncovered with the corrective investigation on a Potsdam meeting. But it's very difficult to really prove this. And what the AfD has done is pretty obvious in terms of the free democratic basic order. Adherents include functionaries such as leaders of the party, the higher the better, but also just normal run-of-the-mill AfD party members can be attributed to the whole party. But it's difficult to attribute something a party member said to the whole party, because you basically have to prove that the whole party is behind that statement. For example, if Björn Höcke is convicted of a certain charge, it doesn't mean that the whole party or even the state association can be banned. Even more difficult is to attribute behavior from people who are not even members of the AfD but just support the AfD, for example, hang up their posters. But the prerequisites for the attribution of behaviors to the whole party is that the party accepts it, or the party even tells people to do that thing. So it's not enough to found a second NSU terror group and murder people. It's only relevant if someone from the AfD, a leader of the AfD, says they did good. And Then there's the criterion where a ban actually failed. It's really abstract aims, ideas, but it must be more than ideas. It must be an active element. There must be an active element. Well, it used to be defined as aggressive, combative, but that's no longer the definition. It's a planned action, and it's a strategy that the party must actually try to implement. For example, the AfD said we will bring our struggle into the parliaments and bring it to the streets. And that was actually accepted as a plan. But there's a second item. There must be the possibility that the party actually implements their plans. This is the criterion of potentiality. This is one of the few criteria in the AfD where everyone would say this is definitely true. The party has such a high meaning that this wouldn't fail the ban procedure. But point 3 is especially difficult. So the question whether the prerequisites are met is difficult to answer. But you could say the court in Münster just decided on that the party is suspect of right-wing extremism. Yeah, but the estimation of the Office of Protection of the Constitution has different prerequisites. They do not need to prove, like, for example, that there are plans and strategies. And on the federal level, it's only a suspect case. And it's more difficult to really bring complete proof. So the Constitutional Court will have to explain why the party is absolutely right-wing extremists, and these criteria don't match the criteria for a party ban. So that is the reason why I've never said publicly, why don't you file an application for a ban on this party? I'll come back to that later.
And now we'll come to the effects of such a procedure. Firstly, it would be politically clever for that party to moderate its positions while the procedure is going on, and that could be across a few years. You can think of that what you may. It may make it more difficult to actually prove unconstitutionality, but it would be quite unwise of the party to continue producing such materials. But it's a big party. You have seen what individual leading candidates have said, and they apparently are not in control of everyone, so it could just go quite differently. In case of success, a ban would mean that party structures would be abolished. An important consequence would be that all parliamentary seats would go away in federal parliaments, state parliaments, and also, depending on details of the decision, also in many communal parliaments. Meaning that if such a party were to be part of a government in one federal state, that government would lack its parliamentary support and could be voted out by that parliament. The next item that is, of course, linked to the party structures being abolished, there will be no more financing for that party either, and that will be very relevant because these people employ a large number of people in the various parliaments that they have entered, including many extremists, as we know through this research, through investigations, but also their social media campaigns, their election campaigns. Now, all that factually, the right extremist messages that surely are emanating from these parties, that is a fact, whether they come from the core of the party or not, they will be gone, or at least they will be much reduced. It would also be forbidden to found a replacement organization. You could, of course, say, okay, we'll just go as the same group of people and found a new party and then come back even stronger. It's not as easy. What they could do is found a new party, but it would be sufficiently distinct from the party that had just been banned, most easily through personnel, but also, of course, through political positions. What would also be possible is that they could join a different party. There is a grouping next to the right of the conservative CDU called the Values Union. They did not close themselves off against the AfD explicitly. They could join that, but it would take time until that grouping would attain the same strength as the AfD. So a ban like this would not kind of exclude right extremists from power in the long term, but in the medium term it would. And in theory, what could also emanate or result is that the party is only partially banned, in particular certain federal state wings or branches of the party. And it could also lead to a mere stop in party financing, which the AfD has experienced. Oh no, another party which is now called Homeland, used to be called NPD as far as this interpreter knows. The difference between exclusion from state finance support and a party ban is the potentiality as a condition would not have to be proved. So if an application was made to exclude the AfD from financing, but not actually ban the party, that condition would not have to be proved. Now, how does such a procedure actually proceed? As you probably know, there are only three groups of people that can apply for this, which is the federal state parliament, the two chambers, Bundestag and the Bundesrat, and the president. Even if they were convinced that the preconditions for such a ban would exist are in place, they cannot be forced to actually start this procedure. The third institution, by the way, was not the state president, but the federal government, because there is a certain amount of personal or individual judgment that is part of this. But I believe that it would only come to this point when it was much too late, when there were no further people that are in the position to apply for this ban that are not from the AfD. The next item is the duration of the procedure. The last time this was tried, the procedure took 4 years. You could say that this issue is much more urgent these days, so people would have to rush it more. But as the party has grown significantly, the party is much more relevant in politics. So the application would have to be examined much more closely. And it can be expected that the party would fight back against the procedure much more effectively. Back then, they simply did not take part in the procedure as a form of protest, but maybe they weren't able to pay their lawyers. So I would assume that it would be impossible to conduct this procedure in less than 3 years. The first procedure also failed because of the question whether it is allowed to monitor the party during the proceedings. In theory, that is possible, but one thing that is not allowed to be used is secret investigators. So at a time that the German parliament maybe says they are going to apply for a party ban, then secret investigators would have to be withdrawn from the party. There are other ways of observance that could be used, but this secret investigators would surely be the most effective. And we don't know how many there are in the party, but I don't know. Another important hurdle is the so-called preliminary procedure, which would have to be closed before the actual procedure starts. That's what often happens. First, you have to investigate whether there is sufficient chance for that party ban procedure to succeed. And until that preliminary procedure is closed, the time passes, and when it is closed with a negative result, then the whole ban is kind of null and void. The procedure will have to be stopped. And also, if the Senate of the Second Senate of the Federal Constitutional Court, which is the responsible Senate, would be to vote on this, it would require a 2/3 majority. That's a high quorum, and again, a reason not to enter into this without much thought. Of course, you could also say, let's just wait. Maybe Bijan Moini of the AfD will become the Prime Minister, and maybe then we could apply for an urgent decision on this. And that would be an accelerated procedure. But we assume that the strategy of the party would not be to immediately go for a kind of big band style of governing once they are in power. I don't think that would be very clever of them. They would first have to ensure that they would be safe from party ban procedures. Also, the notion that an accelerated procedure like this could be used to stop this party from acting, a party that would be in government potentially, I would regard that as highly problematic. I don't believe that the Constitutional Court would go along with such a reasoning and actually admit such a procedure and say, okay, all seats in Parliament will have to be suspended until the final decision. Other people say, well, let's start the application now and let's have the court look into this. And if the preliminary investigation says it's not going to be successful, then we might just resubmit later on when the party has shown their face a bit more. I'm not quite optimistic that could work. I don't think that would be easy. Political capital would be spent on that first application. Also, as soon as the main procedure is started, a second application after a failure of the first one could only be based on new findings, and that is quite a big hurdle. It isn't enough to just find 2 or 3 new documents and then put them forward. You have to have quite a large amount of new findings to justify a new application. Now, there are a number of political counter-arguments, of which only one really seems to be strong to me, which it is undemocratic. The party is much too large for a ban. The first argument, well, yes, it is undemocratic, but only in the sense that if you understand democracy as a political competition between parties, democracy these days, fortunately, is much more. It's the protection of human dignity and the protection of the rule of law. So if you were just to say it's just about competition between parties, and a party cannot be banned because they could no longer compete, that would ignore the fact that minorities that need protection through the Constitution can never win in such a competition. They cannot safeguard themselves from right extremist parties coming into power. So it has to be possible to ban a party, even if it is large. Also, a large party, of course, might mean a large amount of danger. I know that the AfD is not the NSDAP, the Nazi party in the Third Reich. Bijan Moini is not Adolf Hitler. I hope that there wouldn't be a new Holocaust. But if in the November of 1932, the NSDAP, the Nazi party, had the election result that brought them into the chancellery later, if we had the chance to ban the party then, no one would have said that in hindsight to not do that because it would be undemocratic. But so this cannot be a kind of catch-all argument against this. Second argument, you have to fight against the AfD using political means. Of course, you do have to, but if that doesn't work, then what I've just said applies. You cannot just then withdraw and say every country gets the party that it votes for, because minorities cannot form political majorities. So, at least for their protection, it must be possible, if you see that you cannot fight a party that is set to undermine and abolish the free democratic basic order, it has to be possible to ban them. Thirdly, you cannot forbid the kind of thinking. True, but that's not what it is about. It's not about convincing people a party ban. It's just about making sure that extremists cannot they cannot gain government power. And of course, it's true that this cannot be a long-term strategy, but in the medium term, it's a very effective means to keep extremists out of power. And I would also claim it maybe would impress people with that mindset, or the other way around, if we had such a spread of right extremist thinking in the last few years, would we have that if the AfD were not in place? I'm not sure. And fifth, perhaps the weakest argument, this is dangerous, there might be a civil war. I don't believe it. I believe that people would understand that they are still quite okay without the party, but there might be individual extremists that would then commit attacks and so on. But what a poor kind of situation that would be. If we were to say that we're afraid of certain extremists, we're afraid of not being able to exert our monopoly on violence, I don't believe in that. The last argument, that would be convincing to me. If that procedure were to fail, it would be a catastrophe. Yes. If a judgment would be in favor of the AfD, I don't believe that there are so many, let's say, reserve voters that would then vote for the party. But the fear is that a negative result would mean that the party radicalizes further, becomes more dangerous, and that there will be no capital for a second attempt. Which is that I am very much against ignoring the risks or belittling the risks in that procedure. And that is the basis for the position that we as the Gesellschaft für Freiheitsrechte, the Society for Freedom Rights, have. Political fight, of course, has precedence, and party bans are highly problematic, but in the extreme case, they are legitimate. But whether such an extreme case actually exists has to be investigated now and intensively, and that is the big criticism we have of politics. Although we have hundreds of thousands of civil servants in the various institutions, there's not even a handful of them that systematically investigate whether the preconditions of a party ban are in place or not. And the fact that that is necessary should be obvious to everyone. And thirdly, which sadly I cannot talk much about at the moment, to forfeit their basic rights, another possibility, is not really an alternative. Firstly, our order depends on people being able to retain power, and to have people forfeiting or to take away basic rights from people doesn't seem like the right procedure. People like Björn Höcke would become a martyr, and it wouldn't have that much of an effect either. So that alternative, for various reasons, we don't see as very realistic. And I've now come to the end of my time, and both Max Steinmeier and I, who have been talking now, we will be at the meetup at 3 o'clock. Meetup 1. You can talk to us there. Thank you.